everyone, and welcome to the Dr. Music Podcast. Today, I have Luis Espaillat with me. Luis is an accomplished bass player, graduate of the infamous Berklee College of Music. He has done work in movies and television, as well as video games and commercials. He has done studio recordings on a number of hits and almost every genre of music, including a number one hit. Or two. We're going to talk about that a little bit. He has been on stage with some of the world's top artists, from country stars like Lee Greenwood, Adkins, Jo Dee Messina, to rockers like Tony Harnell, Tantric, Tom Keifer, many, many others. He is a graduate of the infamous Berklee College of Music, as I mentioned. And, my first question is, how far does that get you? It's gotta be great. Are there any bad students at the Berklee College of Music?
Are there any bad students? That it depends. I mean, you could look, music is an art form, which art is subjective. So you could say like, oh, that guy's bad. It's not necessarily that he's bad at his skill. It's just maybe he doesn't play or have the approach that you like, like a style of music. It's like a style of music, a genre. I don't think so. I think like with anything with Berklee, to me, it was great. I had a great experience, but it's very much of a thing of you get out of it what you put into it. Mm-hmm. So, obviously you can go there, be accepted, get into this college and do nothing with it, right. I don't say flunk, but you can just be, passive and not do anything, because all the things that I did there, not just the academic side of it, are a lot of skills that I learned and I still use to this day in the industry, which is literally just how to work with people. Right. You know what I mean? It's not, the dreaded word networking, which I don't like it. I think of it more of building relationships, but it really is this. And these are skills that apply to any occupation. But music more so, because it's a very emotional thing, a very personal thing that you're doing. So obviously it's more important to work well with the people that you're making music with, kind of thing. So I think that's what I liked about Berklee is just you kind of got a taste out of that in a somewhat safe environment. Because obviously, look, we've got other classmates that were there and they did something, wasn't bad, but kind of infamous, if you will. And we're still talking about it to this day, years later. Oh, you remember that guy? He's the one who did. Oh, yeah, I remember him, kind of thing. And we still talk about it in the industry. But no, I don't think there's any, like, if I wouldn't say like a bad student or a bad player, it would just be the people that would maybe fall in that category are the people that might have realized they don't have the drive for it, because obviously you get in, that's step one. It's kind of like if you sign a record deal. I got a record deal with a major label. Well, cool. That's just the beginning. That's not the be all end all. Right. Now you got to go do something with it. Right. So it's the same thing with Berklee, I think, for sure.
Yeah. And that's, that makes perfect sense. But having that name underneath and on the resume is it's a pretty great thing, because we know it's a prestigious school, and there's some great teachings going on there. Everybody is aware of that, which is really great. And you've got quite the resume. So many different artists, so many different genres, performance as well as session, and so many different outlets with television and movies and video games, and there's nothing you haven't touched. I think is really great. And am I to understand that you are a father of 3 as well?
I am indeed. Wow. Actually, yeah, that's its own, topic for a podcast in itself.
No doubt.
And it's strange, because for me, I've had this conversation many times with other parents and whatnot, but it's one of those things where even personally, like I never imagined myself as a parent. It wasn't, I know some people, it's part of their checklist of life goals, grow up, get a job, get married, have kids. And that's all great. But obviously everybody pulls different. And for me, it was like, I always wanted to be married and I see myself with somebody, but being a parent wasn't at the top of my list. I don't think it was bad. I always was open to the idea, but it wasn't like I actively seeked it out.
Right.
And it was my wife my ex-wife who actually kind of was the one who I don't want to say pushed the issue, but she did bring it up because obviously she wanted to, and she knew I was open to it. Mm-hmm. But she also was very much of the mindset, it's like, look, if I don't talk about it, if I don't kind of put the wheels in motion, you're going to be more of the passive participant. You're just going to like go, whatever. If it happens, it happens. It doesn't, it doesn't. Whereas she was way more active about it. But I'm glad she did, because what happened with us is that our 2 older kids are adopted, because we didn't think we could get pregnant, for lack of a better term, right. Which is a big catalyst for a lot of people that do adopt. Not everybody, but that definitely is a big, decision maker right there. And then, after we adopted our 2 older kids who are brother and sister, lo and behold, we got pregnant and we got a 3rd. So, and that's my youngest. So it's great there. It's made for a very interesting it's like, I could easily say, like, people talk about, it's like, oh, you're a musician and you've traveled the world and you've done this and whatever. They make documentaries about that, and they can make a sitcom about this. Like, no, forget that. That's peanuts compared to my home life. As far as here's my kids. I have 2 kids from a foreign country, and I've got one born the natural way, and just the different personalities that they have, which is great, but they're very strong personalities, very distinct. So it's not like where in some cases, and not that it's a bad thing, you might have a sibling bunch and you can tell, like, oh, you guys are related. Okay, so there's certain similarities. No, my kids, yeah, I think by now they've grown and you can tell that there are certain things that they have together, but generally speaking, that's not the case. They are very strong, different personalities. Yeah. And that's not a bad thing, but it does make for entertaining home life. It's hysterical. And of course, the best thing about it is my kids, like, in relations to what I do, they're like, yeah, whatever. That's not that cool. It's like I had the best case in point. I was playing the Ryman Auditorium, famous venue here in Nashville. And I've gotten to do it a multitude of times, but primarily tied in with the Grand Ole Opry. The first time I got to play it that had nothing to do with the Opry was right at my birthday. And I was out with the band Eve to Adam, and we were out with Creed. And that was our package thing. And I had just adopted, I guess, it'd been a couple of years. I had my 2 older kids. My youngest one hadn't come along yet, but they got the whole, like, they had the director's chairs, like, on the stage. Like, it was actually the Creed camp is one is like, hey, if you want to borrow our, like, special guest chairs for your kids, knock yourself out. And they're on the stage. They're getting my viewpoint of the Ryman, the audience, the rock crowd, like, really into it. And I would, I'm rocking out. I'd turn around and look at them, see what they're doing. They're just like, cool. Yeah, we're here. Hi, Dad. But it's not like, ooh, It wasn't like their eyes weren't. No,
right.
Whatever.
That's pretty cool, actually. I mean, yeah. All the rest of us would definitely be starstruck just by the venue itself.
Oh yeah.
With nobody playing, just to sit there would be a thrill for many of us. To have that going on, and your dad, especially out there, and that's it's great that you're just another guy to them. That's pretty great too. For sure. Now, I found you in Minnesota just a couple of weeks ago, and I've probably seen you before, but with Tony Harnell, of course. Tony Harnell being one of the best vocalists of our time. The guy is just astounding. I just couldn't believe my ears, really. I've been a fan for years, but you guys came out and his voice is just unbelievable. Were you a fan of Tony's? Did you know his work when you got the call from him to, how did that gig go down? He calls you up and says, I need a bass player. Do you know the Tony catalog?
Yeah, I actually did. I mean, there's been many times with different artists where either I don't know it at all, or I like, heck yeah, I remember all that stuff, or just like, oh, I've heard the one song, or it's a multitude of things. With in regards to the Tony thing, I actually and it's funny because as soon as as soon as I got the call and my head ran through, it's like, oh yeah, TNT. I was like, oh yeah, 10,000 Lovers and Intuition. But also when I got the list of songs for the show, there was at least another 3 or 4 that I went, oh yeah, that was him too.
Right.
Oh, I forgot about this. And yeah. And I remember vividly too, and this might age me a bit or date me, but in high school, somebody gave me a cassette of Tell No Tales, the TNT album that has a lot of the songs that we perform with and that we did in Minnesota at that show. And it was the same thing where I remember, and as soon as I remember, I was working on As Far as the Eye Can See, which is on that album too, and we do it all the time, that it was just like a visceral flashback. This is the power of music for you. I remember sitting in my car in high school when I was 16 years old, my first car, not my car, my parents' car, but you know what I mean? And I remember vividly the cassette that was handed to me because I just had it there because I had a cassette deck. I could just throw it in. And if you remember the shells, the cassettes, you either had not the cover, but the backside was either black, clear, or like this cream color thing. And that one I remember was one of the first cream color boxes that I had for cassettes.
Wow.
And it's like, I didn't think about that for years until like I started kind of hammering down and learning the material. And it was just, like I said, it was like an out of body experience. I didn't think about that since high school. And all of a sudden it was just like, there I was, the cassette, and I could tell you cream color, it was really, really interesting.
Yeah.
So that's that. But to answer your question, as far as how did that come out, it's kind of like any other gig. It was at a certain point, like people talk about you audition for gigs and that kind of thing, which still happens. But the majority of things nowadays, it's really a recommendation based kind of thing. So somebody will recommend you to play with this or that person. And that's what happened with both Tony and with Keifer and with probably the vast majority of my gigs in the last God knows how many years. But it was somebody who was working with Tony at the time. This was mid 2019. So this was, just prior to the pandemic. And this saying, hey, Tony Harnell, he has a show here in town in Nashville. He's opening for Stryper at a place here called the Wild Horse, which is, if people are not familiar with it, it's downtown, but it's a pretty sizable venue. It's nice, big production, seats a few thousand people kind of thing. So it wasn't just like Wild Horse Saloon. Sounds like a roadhouse. Now it's nice. It's big. So that's how I met. And that show was October of 2019. And then, Tony and I hit it off then, and that was it. We just kind of stayed in touch, and Tony's like, hey man, obviously I haven't done a full band show stateside in decades, trying to do more, obviously, because I want to get out there and do more. And the pandemic happened. We stayed in touch, and he's like, oh, eventually, just, man, can I call you if there's another one? Of course. We just, once the pandemic eased up, we're like, let's go get coffee and shoot the crap for a bit or whatever. And then little by little, a couple shows started to trickle in. So we got, and mind you, that Rocktember show that we did with him was probably I think I'll say it's my 5th show with Tony. That's it.
Wow.
But we had gotten called to do M3, which is the beginning of this year. So that was the next show. It didn't happen until M3. And so there's M3 in May. And a week before, Tony booked a show in Huntsville, Alabama, which is only like 2 hours from here, as a warm-up gig, which is cool. I'm like, cool, it's another gig, and it gives us a chance to kind of iron out the show with a couple new guys in place, with Dan Duchette on drums and Garv Bali on guitar, who him and I were in Eats Adam together. And also Garv was one of the principal songwriters. So I always like to say, hey, you're a legitimate hit songwriter. You should play up on that. Nobody knows that about him, because he's had some chart success with writing and obviously playing the way he does. But that was it. That's literally been the case with Tony. And now we're in that kind of, Tony's in this process of trying to rebuild, if you will, or build up this solo thing. It's kind of the same thing. I equate it to, because I worked with Tom Keifer this summer. And Tom is the same boat, where he's like, okay, I'm going to do like the Tom Keifer band. I'm going to do the Keifer thing. Not just, obviously there's going to be the Cinderella connection, but he's really trying an effort to build an audience where they'll still come for just him. And now, mind you, he's been doing it for about a decade now, and he's had really good success, but it's a building process. It takes time.
Sure. And
I think that's what the deal with Tony.
Yeah, and there's always that relation with the Tony with TNT and Keifer with Cinderella, but that I think these guys, they're they're good enough, and they get guys like you that are can fit into a situation and really play the stuff solid, uh, and it really shows. And both of those sets in Minnesota were just tremendous. I mean, it was just so tight and so ironed out.
Yeah.
So and that's the way you build. I think is you be a legitimate force, and they definitely are for sure. Um,
Absolutely.
I spoke with a guy named Dan Murphy of All Good Things,
Mhm.
the band All Good Things now. That was some months ago, but he put that group together after he had success as a session artist. That they were a session group. They had worked together in sessions and they knew each other, and they had done this thing. Well, they did this song that was just, this is their story, and they did the song and it blew up. It was just huge. Millions and millions and millions of plays. Um, People were asking when the band was going to do another song or album.
Mhm.
And it wasn't even a band. So
Yeah.
he made it a band. It was that successful that he was almost forced to have say, hey, let's do this and make a band, because this is a thing. Is that something? Do you ever see yourself doing that? You're so, I mean, you do this session thing to such great success, and you enjoy it. I know you do. Um, do you ever see yourself, if that happened, something like that, where you had huge success with one particular thing, and there was a demand to do that because that's what's being successful? Is that something you would entertain?
I would say never is my thing. I'm always, one of the things is the way I operate too is I just kind of go with the flow a lot of times with opportunity. I mean, if there's an opportunity, you seize it. So
Mhm.
if I were in that situation and a song like just blew up like that, that was like something I did personally or something, I would probably see what I can do with it. I wouldn't just let it lay there. I do understand some people not wanting to, because obviously then it's like, oh, I got to shift gears and go on the road for a long time or try to think of something else. So I totally understand the motivation to not want to pursue it. And honestly, I don't even know if I could give you an honest answer what I would do in that situation. It would have to depend on what's going on in my life at that moment, how I feel about whatever that was that I did. Is this, obviously, if it's something I created, a song that I wrote or whatever, and off we go. I don't know. I would have to just kind of take that as it comes.
Yeah, yeah. What made you pursue music? Was it that, sitting in the car at 16 listening to TNT? You say, I want to do that. What really just got you to say, this is that moment, where you just said, I need to do this. This is what I want to do.
That's a really good question. There isn't, I can't really pinpoint one thing, because music, and thankfully the arts as a whole, has always been a part of my life since I could walk in some capacity. Both of my parents are not professional artists in any capacity,
Wow.
but they both had enormous respect and love for every kind of art. Specifically, my father was obviously a big classical music head, but growing up in the Dominican Republic, obviously there was the whole Latino style and everything else, which thankfully I got to learn as I went along as well. My mother, on the other hand, too, was very much, she's a great visual artist. Like, my mother decided, I'm the oldest of all my siblings, so I was their first kid. And my mother was always the one like telling my dad's like, okay, cool. I want to balance him out, meaning like, okay, I'm going to get him into piano lessons and oil painting classes and everything else. And she's like, I'll do it with you. And, that's one of those things where even my mom is in a hobby capacity, but really well, she's a great visual artist. Like, her paintings are gorgeous. And I could barely draw a stick figure. So, I mean, that kind of stuff. I started taking piano lessons at like 6. And as far as when, I mean, even within a few years, I could venture to guess that I could see myself doing music professionally. And what that meant for me then, I didn't even know. Like, I didn't know. I went from, I could go teach school band, but at least I'll be doing music.
Mm-hmm.
Or the big thing for me, the one crossover with my dad's love for classical and in the contemporary was always movie scores. So movie scores are, you take the classical, put the contemporary spin, there you go. And I was a big lover, still am, of that. So at one point I was like, maybe I'll, score movies. I would love to do that. I still would love to do that. I think I just have to have the right project to do it. So there wasn't like, I couldn't pinpoint one specific moment where like, I'm going to do this, just because it's always kind of just been there. And I think both of my parents have said at separate times, like, oh yeah, of course you're going to do this, even as I use my dad's example, where he's very, like, in a good way, he's very business minded. So he was always like, well, okay, if you're going to study music, get something to fall back on. And I said, no, I don't want to fall back on it. So, okay, well, fine. Well, how about go to college for music, get a degree? Okay, I can do that. And that's hence Berkeley. And I pursued that because I liked their program being more broad based and having a lot of more contemporary elements. Yeah. But yeah, anyways, sorry, there wasn't one specific thing. I just think it was always there. And even into adulthood, I started to realize, like, yeah, no, this is what I want to do. And if I'm doing something else, eventually I would just be miserable.
Yeah. And it's that's a culture of music that you create in a household like that, that your parents created for you. Mm-hmm. To grow up in that and live in that, you don't know any better. You don't know any different. Which is really a very constructive thing. It's pretty special. That you had that. Really great. Yeah. I'm exploring your history, your legacy that you have going. Dixie Horsepower.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about that. Looks like a lot of fun.
That
Gaurav, guitar there. Troy Laketta from Tesla on drums, and you got Kevin Law. Tell me a little bit about that, and what that is for you in the canon of what you do.
That came about. It started many years ago. I met Troy Laketta. God, I want to say it's probably been about 12 years ago now, maybe more. And he'll correct you on that. He's got a better sense of time than I do with that kind of stuff. And I met him. There was a random artist. We do artist showcases, usually like a quick 45-minute set, backing an artist who's doing a short set for potential label heads or management people that are interested. So they're just like, hey, do a quick showcase, and say, so 6 o'clock in the afternoon, 45 minutes at a club. And I remember the artist called me and said, hey, the drummer who was going to do it can't do it, but I got Troy Laketta. And I'm like, Troy Laketta? Yeah, that's him. I'm like, and she's like, Tesla. I'm like, first of all, he's in town. Second of all, he's going to do an artist showcase. Isn't he busy doing Tesla? Lo and behold, he showed up and banged it out. And we had a great time, and we hit it off and have been friends ever since. And then he told me about, Troy has always done a multitude of side projects since day one. He's just always been keeping busy. He's always likes to keep musically busy. And initially, we put this band together. The original name was Cadillac Drive. That was the name he came up with, because what he wanted to do was a rock band, but he wanted to have a little bit of we're in Nashville, like a little bit of maybe a Southern rock slant or something of that nature, hence the Cadillac Drive and then Dixie Horsepower. And Kevin Lawson was already in place, who's the singer and one of the primary songwriters. Kevin's an Atlanta guy. He worked a lot with like Butch Walker and Marvelous 3 and that whole scene, which, yeah, exactly. It's pretty phenomenal. But he was part of that scene. So obviously Kevin, who now lives in Florida, is phenomenal in his own right. But we're like, yeah, this is the guy we want to work with. And we had another guitar player for a while who then left. And I'm the one who recommended Garv, because at this point I'd already worked with Garv in Eve to Adam and did those tours and that record with him. Mm-hmm. And it was one of those, of course, like anything else, everybody's a little trepidatious. Was like, I haven't heard this guy. Is he any good? Blah, blah, blah. I'm like, well, first of all, I'm not going to send you a slouch, So
Right.
trust my word. I'm not going to trust it's because it's going to be on me. If it doesn't work, then you're like, hey man, why did you send me this guy who can't play? But I love the fact because that twice has happened now with Garb where I recommend him to things outside of that. And that was the first where he went over to Troy. Troy invited him to his house just to hang out, have coffee and talk. And then I couldn't go. And then apparently it devolved into a jam session and they jammed for like a long time. And I got the text from Troy going like, where has this guy been all my life? Cool. And then the other example I'll use real quick to slightly sidetrack was the same thing with Tony Harnell. When I recommended him to Tony, Tony's like, well, this, Ronnie Latigro is a guitar hero. This is not an easy. I'm like, I understand. Yep. But Garb has the ability and more importantly, has the work ethic to get it done and done right. And same deal. He was just like, oh, where's this guy been all my life? I'm like,
yep.
See?
And and I saw that at the show. I'm a big fan of TNT, big fan of Ronnie. And he's so inventive with the instrument and the way he plays. To see Tony doing this to Graf was really something special. He's got to be great because Tony's worked with one of the best.
Absolutely, for so long too.
Yeah, and they're great friends. I know they are. So to see that it demanded tremendous respect. And he was getting that from Tony, and it meant a lot to me as a fan, for sure.
Oh, for sure, and same here because that's one of those things. Like the people that are fans of TNT that are gonna, whether or not they show up and they don't know stuff, if they know TNT, that's one of the things outside of Tony's voice that they're going to gravitate to. They're going to know those guitar solos because that was a big Guitar Hero band. So it's one of those things where like, okay, you have to, obviously, Garf could have taken it off to a separate direction and it still would have been good. But he understood also that, look, you can't deviate. You have to honor the solos. You have to, like, people are going to know melodically. It's like going to see, I'm sure it's the same thing when you go to see Sammy Hagar and you see Vic Johnson play Eddie Van Halen stuff. Like, he's still copying the Eddie Van Halen licks, like the memorable hooks you're going to hear because that's what people want to hear. But anyways, to finish off the Dixie Horsepower thing, we did do an EP. It's out there, so you can go check it out on all the streaming platforms. And we did 5 songs. And we did do a couple live shows. But the trickiest thing with that, it's been dormant for a while just because everybody's busy doing other things. Obviously, Troy was off. I mean, Troy's now doing the Guess Who, but he's still keeping busy. And I'm off doing a few things. Garth's doing a few things. Kevin's in Florida also doing his own thing. Kevin has a few solo records as well that are great. So that's been the only thing. We all enjoy each other and we've enjoyed doing that band. But we knew from the get-go, it's like, well, this is going to be one of those we'll do when we can do it.
Right.
We know it's not going to be something that we can just go 110% because we're busy making a living, paying the bills.
Right. And that's cool. That's what it struck me as is this is what I'm doing this out of love. This isn't a gig that's going to pay me great money and I'm going to feed my family off of this. This is something I'm going to do because I love doing it. And that comes across with the Dixie Horsepower stuff. It's pretty cool. Sure. Is there a genre of music that you enjoy more than any other?
Not really, no. I've been asked that a million times. I'm sure you've got the same question yourself too, I'm sure.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah.
It's literally with music and not just within different genres, but different artists, different bands, different whatever songs. It's just, what mood am I in right now? I'm in the mood for blank. I'm in the mood for this. I'm in the mood for, the whatever. So that answer changes based on my mood.
Yeah.
And I very much subscribe to the philosophy that if it's good, it's good. If it's not, it's not. Mm-hmm. It's not about, obviously growing up and music, especially talking to people from other countries. It's very much an American centric trait to have where in high school or whatever, well, I'm a rocker, I'm a metalhead, I'm a country person, I'm a this. It's so much a genre is tied into your personal identity. What you wear, do the whole thing, the whole shooting match.
Yeah.
But if you even ask most of those people, like, well, I'm a rocker, so I gotta hate country. Just, it's a principle. But you like Hank Jr. Well, yeah, I like him. And well, you like this other? Well, yeah, I like him too. And then you realize, like, oh, okay, you don't. You just chose to kind of wall yourself off. So I'm very much that way. I'm very much of the whatever floats my boat at that moment. And I'm always fascinated. And when people say, hey, here's something new you've never heard of. And I still love that when people give me new, whether it's a new genre that I've never heard before, but I love discovering new things all the time. Yeah. And I really do enjoy it. So, and then it just floats my boat. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. Well, tomorrow, that's what I'm in the mood for. Today, no, but tomorrow, yeah.
Yeah, and I think of that too. It's like a toolbox for me. When I need a certain tool to turn a certain crank, that's what I pull out.
Exactly.
It's not always the same tool, for sure.
Right.
I saw an interview you did where you were talking about Zeppelin and playing John Paul Jones bass lines.
Yeah.
You played Ramble On without a pick.
Right.
And you pick up a pick and play Nobody's Fault But Mine.
Yep.
I noticed that, and that's slightly unusual. You can tell me if you find it unusual. With bass players, you're either a no pick guy or you're a pick guy. Not too many play to the song with a pick that I've noticed, with or without a pick. You either play without or you play with. That kind of told me that you needed a certain sound that needed a pick. What is your view on the whole using the pick with the bass? Do you do that? Do you switch off?
I do switch off, and that's I think it's just like you said, different tools, different toolboxes. It's a different sound. Mm-hmm. Whether you play with a pick or your fingers, it's very different because obviously you're talking about like, something very hard and stiff or harder than flesh. Even if you have calluses like I do here, it's still flesh. And to me, the two approaches are this. If I'm in the studio, which is great, like even, case in point, this morning I was in the studio and the last song I almost went for a pick because it was aggressive, but I found that I could actually drive harder with my fingers, so I did that. Okay. In the studio, it depends on if it floats my boat, or in some cases the producer might just go, hey man, can you play with a pick? Okay, sure. I got a ton of picks already. But if I'm going into a situation where I'm playing for somebody else where the stuff has been recorded already, so case in point, like Tony Harnell, since that was recent, all that stuff was recorded with a pick. So I play it with a pick. Some of those things, if it were up to me, I'd play with fingers, but I'm like, that's not the sound. That's not the approach, because you also find that it is a different approach. You play different. You want to play different is good. Whether you're good with this or that or both, you're going to play different with a pick than you are with your fingers, and the approach is different. The way you subdivide the notes and the way you approach each different note is going to be that way. So that's the way I do it. I mean, the studio, I get to choose, or I use my own judgment, like, hey, this would be cool with a pick, or this would be cool with fingers. Live, it's like, well, what was that originally played with? I did have an instance recently where it went against what I thought I should do, and that was Tom Keifer. So all the Tom stuff, with Eric playing bass on that stuff, pick. Mm-hmm. Everything I've seen, and I've met Eric. Eric's great, but anytime I've ever seen Eric play, he plays with a pick. He's a pick dude. Nothing wrong with that. At least generally what I've seen. I do, talking to Tom, I know that he's probably tracked a couple things with fingers, but generally it's a pick thing. So when I went out with Tom this summer and I'm playing all those Cinderella hits, I'm ready with the pick. Tom's like, hey, can you play with your fingers on these? I'm like, cool. He's like, I'm just going for a different approach. He just like say, hey man, think Motown. Approach the Cinderella stuff like you're playing Motown. So can you play with your fingers? I'm like, no problem. So that's why on that gig, 24/7, I was playing with the pick. I was playing with my fingers. I carried picks with me just in case, but all I did was the end of shows was just toss them out. That's all I had the picks for on that gig. Hey, cool, toss some picks. But yeah, that's how I approach it. And I definitely have learned. I started as a finger player. That was always my thing. This was my go-to.
Right.
But I learned to love the pick, shall we say. I was early on kind of like, real bass players don't do that. I had to stick up my butt about it. But I did learn. I watched. There's a bunch of other players that I've seen that I admire, session dudes that I've watched that they switch off and they're great at it. Like Chris Chaney, who's one of my favorite players, who was he's with Jane's Addiction. Mm-hmm. He did Alanis Morissette with Taylor Hawkins. He played on the Taylor Hawkins tribute shows. He did a lot of stuff. He was in the Coattail Riders with him, and I've watched him play with both. Like he did the Alanis Morissette gig with his fingers, and then he does Jane's Addiction completely with a pick. You know, because same thing. He's like, well, those songs were recorded Eric Avery with a pick. That's the way I'm going to play it. Yeah. And in the studio also depends. So yeah, I switch off.
Yeah. Do you find that other bass players do that?
You know? There's some that do. I do know that as bass players, yeah, we might have our comfort zone. Again, for me, it is the fingers. Right. But I have seen some other players switch on and off. But generally speaking, in a gig situation, if it's a gig, they usually stick to one or the other. Yeah. I don't see many that switch in the middle of a gig, live-wise. Right. Now, again, in the studio, same thing. I have seen dudes more inclined to be flexible, you know, as far as like if they're that. But, you know, yeah, I do see a lot more dudes very much like, this is where I lean, and there's nothing wrong with it. That's part of their sound.
Right. Right. Definitely. Definitely. A number of strings. You know, there's some guys that, you know, I don't need more than 4 strings. That's what I like. Yeah. It's you know, it's good enough. Then you got guys who want, you know, if you can put 10 strings on a bass, hey, yeah. Increase my palette. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
I would say that, you know, you again play to the song, whatever, you know, if you think you can go stretch it a little bit further, give me more strings, I'm happy with that. Is that your mentality there too as well?
Yeah, again, it's the same thing where it's like the right tool for the right job kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And it's funny because in this last, I don't know, decade or so, there has been a certain unhipness, so to speak, about anything with more than 4 strings. Mm-hmm. I just noticed that. And there's nothing wrong with it because what people may or may not know, especially the difference between a 4-string and a 5-string, other than it has a whole string, but literally it's 5 more notes. That's it. You're getting 5 extra notes. Right. That's it. So just because I'm playing a 5-string bass doesn't mean I'm going to play that low 5th string all the time. I still might play like a 4-string. I have certain basses that happen to be a 5-string, but I play them because they have a specific sound, even though I'm just needing 4 strings. Yeah. You know, I have a couple basses that are like that are have like a pop sheen to them. So if I'm doing like a pop track, I tend to gravitate to those basses, even though I might not use the scale of all 5 strings.
Right.
But again, like it's the same thing. And then when it comes to the stage, I'm like, again, well, what was the stuff recorded on? Oh, was it that? Okay. So like, case in point, Tony, 4-string. Cool. That's all I need. Bring a 4-string. Same thing with Keifer, but with Tom, he has a couple solo songs that were with a 5-string. Okay. So when I was with Tom, I did switch. I had to. I was like going, okay, cool. And there's some guys that will take a 4-string and string it like a 5, just leave off the high string. Okay. So they'll get the low range, but they don't have the visual, because there are some people that look at a 5-string, they're like, oh, that's uncool now all of a sudden.
Yeah.
It's just the visuals, this optic thing. And I've even the country realm, I have other fellow bass players that their artists, you know, whoever they're backing says, leave that 5-string at home. I don't want to see that on my stage. I'm like, yeah, but your stuff is recorded with a 5-string, and I don't care. So they have to take one of their 4-strings and retrofit it to have the bottom 4 strings of a 5-string set in order to get it out, but still have the visual. Wow. So, I mean, look, and I should ask this question, but I'm getting on a bus tonight to sub in on a country gig for Brian Kelly, who's one of the guys from Florida Georgia Line, from that band. So I'm going to sub in with him on a show tomorrow night. And it's one of those situations, we didn't have a rehearsal. It's like, here's the material. We'll see you on the bus tonight. See you at the show tomorrow. Wow. And which it happens. But a lot of that stuff, 5-string, just has those low notes. So I'm taking a 5-string. But I probably should check before I go, hey, just in case that he is a stickler about the visual, should I bring a 4-string? I think it'll be okay. I don't think that, I mean, based on what I feel, I think they're just like, yeah, bring whatever works. But that has happened a few times.
Wow, that's really interesting.
Yeah,
Yeah, and I mean, a lot of what you do and a lot of the business in the industry is based on a look. There's a visual to it.
of course.
Uh, yeah, but the flexibility is for the young players out there. This is the flexibility here. Don't close yourself down, and be flexible, and adjust to this kind of stuff, because it happens, obviously.
Yeah, absolutely.
um
Absolutely.
what's been the most difficult gig you've had, difficult job, something, is there anything that out there that you just said, man, this is just nearly impossible? What am I doing here? This is, and it took you, a little bit longer to nail down, or just gave you all kinds of trouble.
There isn't one thing in particular where I went like, oh my God, I don't know how I'm going to do this. But there has been some things where I'm like, okay, wow, this is going to take a lot of work. It's going to take a lot of extra work. I'm not going to be able to just kind of breeze through it. There's as much as having knowledge of Latin styles and whatever, because I thankfully grew up with a lot of that, and I've been fortunate enough to have gigs in that genre as well. And I do have one actually coming up in a couple of weeks. Those for me were a little on the tough side, not for getting the style right, because again, it's a little second nature that I heard it growing up. So once you hear things in repetition, once you put your hands on the instrument, it's that much more easier to interpret it. You go like, oh, I kind of know where I have to go.
Right.
But when doing a salsa gig or a Latin gig, where you're up there with 4 percussionists, 5 horn players, a piano player, whatever, a lot of times the way that they structure it is you don't just start the song and end the song at the end of the song. It's not so linear. A lot of times it kind of reads like a jazz chart where you start at the beginning and you go, but then you get to a certain point and it's all, the music is there to read. You get to a certain point where it's like, okay, cool, that's where the trombone's going to take a solo. So we just play that little section over and over again until somebody cues us. But a lot of times the director, whoever's conducting or whoever's leading the band might turn around while we're playing and go, okay, guys, here's what's happening. You see the letter I on your page? Okay, repeat that until I cue you. Once I cue you, get out of there. We're going to jump to H, and then we're going to jump again, do H twice, and then we're going to jump to Q, and then do that 4 times, and that'll be our ending. Now, he's saying this while we're playing.
Yeah.
We're in the middle. So that was always tough for me, because it's the charts are they're specifically notated. So I can read music, but I'm not a fast sight reader, as they say, where like, okay, like a lot of classical players are ingrained and trained how to read like this, like just put something in front of them, they can just play it right down. For me, it's like, okay, A, B, okay, cool. It's not, I can get through it, but I'm not a fast reader. That might be one of the more ones that I can easily point my finger to as far as being difficult. There has been a couple prog rock stuff that I've done as a recording musician, and not that those, like I odd meters and that kind of thing I understand, but there might be, okay, the guitar player's going to do this really fast lick, a la Steve Vai, and we want you to match. Okay, cool. Let me slow that down. Give me a second. And that's, it takes a little time, and to me, it was never like impossible. It was just more like, okay, this is going to require more work than this other thing for me personally. So it's just more like okay, sit down, get a cup of coffee. It's going to take you a while, or buckle in. You got to do your homework. Right. So I think that's, if there's anything hard for me, it's just trying to get things under my fingers that might not come to me as quickly.
Yeah. Yeah. And I find that as a listener to be some of the more fun stuff to listen to, that progressive stuff that's going to change and be a little bit different and take me somewhere where maybe where I've never been. Is it like that for you as a player?
Oh, absolutely. I really do believe that. And that's one of those things where, like I might have said before, that music is very, it's transcending. It'll take you places and that kind of thing. Progressive rock music specifically, if we're talking about that genre, which I've been fortunate enough to do a good chunk as well, is one of those things where I mentioned the whole movie score thing. And to me, the space that it occupies in my brain is almost similar. It's like I could sit there and we might have a 6-minute epic thing, but there's so many different sections and doing things, and it's telling a picture through the music, not just words, but part of that is reflecting the mood of the music. If it's angry, play angry.
Mhm.
So I could shut my eyes if I don't have to read anything. If I shut my eyes and play, it's like I'm there. That style easily takes me somewhere else.
Yeah.
And for that, I grew up listening to that too, and I really did enjoy that kind of stuff as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, like I say, as a listener, I really do enjoy that kind of thing. And as well as, that typical 3-chord AC/DC thing is, it's got its own charm to it as well.
Oh, very much so.
Yeah. Um, Tell me about As It Is. And I want to respect your time. I know it's been a while, but you're just a fantastic conversation. And, what you do is just so fascinating and interesting to me. As It Is, and It's for the Better.
Oh.
Two songs
Mhm.
that are Luis Espaillat. Are these solo tracks? They're extremely different. I mean, like, As Is, it's a jazz kind of thing. And It's for the Better is a punk rock thing,
Mhm.
kind of. Did you write the songs? Are they solo material? Is that something that we'll see more of?
The answer is yes, and I think so. Uh, the way those songs, it's one of those things where I've always been I did write those. I've always been very hesitant to write. That's the one. If you want to talk about difficult things in my life, there's one. It's like that's the hump I'm still really working on. Even writing something simple to me, because I'm fortunate enough to work with so many phenomenal, legendary songwriters that just, man, they've got that down like pat. They're phenomenal songwriters. And so when you try to write something, it just seems kind of trite. You're like, oh, yeah, but
Right.
I'm not that guy or that girl who, writes these phenomenal tearjerkers. I can't do that. But what happened, the pandemic, I can blame all this on the pandemic, is As Is It is the jazz tune came first. And that was my friend Jeff Brown, drummer, who also plays with Reeves Gabrel from Tin Machine and The Cure. He plays in his solo band.
Mm-hmm.
Is an old buddy of mine. He's also a drum tech, by the way, too, with John Party, which is another thing. So there's a guy who does a lot as well, and is also a phenomenal drummer. That track and that video clip that's in the video that I made for it, he sent me that just the way you see it, like no music, no nothing. He's like, hey, man, we're stuck indoors. It's the pandemic. How about I send you this drum track and we can maybe come up with something out of it or whatever. I'm like, so he sends me the drum track. It literally, as you hear it, nothing on it, just all those parts. Everything was parted out. And so I'm like, okay, cool. So do you have like a scratch guitar, a scratch bass, or any lyric ideas? He's like, nope, that's it. I'm like, okay. So I wrote it. I was like, screw this. I'm going to write something. So I came up with the melody. I came up with the chord changes. And then we pulled in our buddy Scott Joyce, keyboard player, session guy here in town, but also plays live with a lot of country artists, to add B3 and his own spin. And it was Jeff's idea. Jeff's like, man, this is kind of cool. I put 5 basses on it. I was just being ridiculous. It was an exercise in creativity. It was just like, can I do this? I don't know. I don't care if it comes out like crap. I'm going to try it anyway. And Jeff liked it enough that he's like, hey, can I pull in Scott to play keys? And that became the song. And then I said, hey, guys, can I just put it out there? You cool with me releasing this? I'm like, knock yourself out. So that was the exercise in creativity, was that song. And then It's for the Better, same kind of thing. I was, again, in the throes of the pandemic. And I'm like, you know what? I don't care. I know that every time I write lyrics, I think they're trite. I think they're shit compared to like all my buddies who are phenomenal songwriters, but I'm just going to do it. Not for anybody else. No delusions of grandeur. It's just for me. So I started to write it, and lyrically speaking, it's the pandemic from the viewpoint of a gamer. One of those guys who sits at home and is just like, because a lot of the gamer buddies of mine, that's one of the ways they could get around the feeling of being cooped up, was like, well, I play online with my buddies all the time, put on the headset, play, and they just did that 24/7. So the song started to come about with me writing from the viewpoint of a young guy. It could be a kid, it could be a high schooler, being a gamer and dealing with the pandemic. Hence the reason the lyrics are like, all right, well, what can I do? I guess I could take a walk around the block. I ain't gonna cut it. That's that lyric, Right. I'm gonna get online and go play. At least I'm a big deal in the gaming world. So at least I'm somebody, so I can have fun with that. They tell us it's for the better. that we stay indoors. It's for the better, don't go. It's for the better. Hence the lyric. And then after that, I said, well, I've got enough buddies. Let me just flesh this out. And Sean Rogers, who sang on it, is a pretty established producer here in town. He produced the Bailey Zimmerman track that I played on that is blowing up on TikTok right now, by the way. But Sean, I asked Sean, I said, hey, man, if I send you this, can you put a little rhythm guitar in it? Can you mix this and make it sound good like you can? He's like, yeah, man, whatever. And I said, do you know the singer who's got that style of voice? Because him and I are both buddies with people in the band Simple Plan. Maybe one of those guys will do it because that's their style, yada, yada. Right. And he sends me a track of another band, just a link to Spotify. And I was like, oh, this is perfect. Who is this? And he's like, that's me singing. Oh. Do you want to sing on this? I said, yeah, that's why I sent it to you. Say, hey, I'll sing on it if you want. And so that's him. That's his voice, as you can see in the video.
Wow.
Cool. I got, and I feel terrible. I'm losing my name. My name's here, but guitar player from Green Jelly is playing guitar on it.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
That's him from Green Jelly, Little Pig. Yeah. And my buddy Harry is on drums, who is a pretty well-established YouTuber, actually. He does the dude drummer guy, Harry Mire, and he's out with Lindsay L now, who I used to work with years ago as well. So we put it all together, and it was just right in the wheelhouse, and we just had a blast doing it. And I was like, guys, you cool if I release this? And they said, sure, knock yourself out. And then it became that. So I had a lot of fun, and it's even in hindsight, is it perfect? No. Is it the best thing since sliced bread? No, but I enjoyed it.
Right. Yeah. And I enjoyed it. It was cool. And I love the difference, like I say, between the two tracks. I found them both, again, big toolbox for me. The drastically different, but yet still musically entertaining and adventurous. It was really cool to hear. And that's your skill set. It's tremendous. It's fantastic. Anything you'd refuse to do?
Not musically speaking, no. Obviously there's a lot of things, like personally, that I refuse to do. Like, I'm not gonna kill somebody, rob or steal or whatever, that kind of thing. But right. Musically, no, not really. I welcome it all, because it's never, if there's a style I've never done before and I wind up doing it, I never regret it. I can't tell you once that I ever have. I'll give you a quick example of that. I was out with an artist named Greg Bates about 10 or so years ago, who's a country artist and also a great songwriter in his own right. And he had a song that was in the top 10. And we were out opening for somebody, and a couple of the guys in the band were friends of mine. And they, Judd Fuller in particular, who also played with the Rock and Roll Residency here in town, bass player. And Phil Schaus was there as well, also from the Residency. But Rodney Adkins was the name of the artist, country artist. And they're out with him. And Judd comes up to me and he's like, hey, man, are you into Jamaican rock steady? And I went like, you mean like reggae? He's like, no, rock steady dance hall. And I'm like, sure. Like I realized later, I was like, oh, I know what you're talking about now. But at the moment, I didn't realize it. And he's like, hey, I'm doing a side project with me and Jeffrey Clements from G Love and Special Sauce is going to front it and play drums. And we're going to go out and go play and call it the Drop Shots. And man, to this day, we've been together. We've been doing that project for like 10 years. We've probably played about 5 times total. But we played in town, and it's a blast. And this is the stuff that predates reggae. The 50s, rocksteady, Jamaican dance hall. And, for somebody that I would imagine somebody else that hasn't done that, where they would be, man, I don't know what that is. I don't think I can do it. As opposed to approaching like, I don't know what that is. So thusly saying, I can't do it. How about, cool, let me go check it out. And it gave me another reason to learn that style. So now I've got that under my belt. And you know what? It's a blast to play.
I bet it is.
It is so much fun. And it's funny because the last time that we played here in town, Rex Brown from Pantera came out to the show.
Wow, cool.
Rex is there. And so at least I get to go, hey, and just give him that, because he's kind of more of the like, okay, I'm going to just sit by the bar over here, kind of keep to myself. But there's nothing musically. I would say is no. There's nothing I won't do, and it served me well because I've now my toolbox has gotten bigger as a result. But honestly, it's so much fun to switch styles and to do something, especially if you've never done it before.
Yeah. Did you play the double bass, the stand up for the Jamaican thing?
On that, no, actually, it wasn't. It was an old one of my old P basses, precision basses with flat wound strings,
Okay.
and I roll the tone, meaning take the high end off of it, so it's all thuddy and tuppy.
Yeah.
It wasn't that because that's what they did. They would just play because a lot of times. Let me grab you an instrument real quick just to give you an example. So with typical 4-string bass, a lot of times your fingers might rest around here somewhere, right?
Right.
And it gives you a certain sound. But the more you move it this way, the more low end and tubby it gets.
Okay.
Because the string is more wamphy over here, playing here versus it's tighter here because it's by this part where it anchors down.
Okay. So is it a damper, almost a dampening kind of thing?
Almost. But you can also use your hands to do that too. So you can, a lot of times in that style, I'll play up here because a lot of the reggae dudes would do that too. But also, if I really want a damper, I would put this part of my hand down the string and, let it ring a little bit. So don't put too much pressure. So, but you're doing this right here with the string. So you still get the thuddiness. So it sounds like you have a mute in there. And in some cases, I'll put a piece of foam in there too to do the same effect.
Okay.
So yeah, that's how I approach it.
See, and all of that is it's ingenious, it's part of being that accomplished player. You can adjust to that. You can get different sound. It's the Jimi Hendrix thing with the feedback. He didn't just play the guitar like everybody else, did some things to get a different sound, a different approach to the instrument. And again, for the young players, do these things. It's a great thing to explore for sure.
Oh, absolutely. The one thing I always tell everybody is like, never close yourself off to anything. Like I said, it's one of those things that once I got to college and I started to have classmates of mine that grew up in different countries, it seemed like the whole being stuck in one genre is very American centric. It seems like more than other countries where, they would go see a pop band one night and then a metal band the next night and have this equal same good time.
Yeah. Tell their friends about it,
Absolutely.
tell the same friend that they went to see a pop band and that won't happen here in the States.
It won't nearly as much. So I mean, that's the one biggest thing I always tell, especially younger people, is just don't close yourself off. Just do it. Just try something. And especially like where people's like, oh man, I'm not too good at Latin jazz, but insert any genre. Okay, cool. Then just go home and listen to some of it. What makes that style unique? And once you get that, then apply it to your instrument and you'll be all right.
Yeah. That's pretty great. It's pretty great. Luis, I could talk to you all night long. I know you got things to do. You're a busy guy. I really do want to respect your time. I promise, which I've abused already. Appreciate it, man.
I'm enjoying this. Thank you.
It's just so great. I got one more for you.
Sure.
What's the one phone call? When we get done here, you want your phone to ring with a job. Who's going to be on the other end in that dream gig, that dream phone call? Who do you hope is on the other end of that?
That is a tough one. And again, like with styles or whatever, I could give you a million different answers because it's just what's in the mood. But first thing that comes to mind, let's say Peter Gabriel, Tony Levin can't do the gig, even though I know I'm not going to get that because I love Tony. Love his playing. Actually, I do have a set of he has these funk fingers. I've got a set of them. I bought a pair. But I would love, because I love that material. I love those songs. That would be a blast. And the way what the job of the bass in that gig is also a lot of fun. But I would also love, like, man, if, the Stones called, Rolling Stones, who's going to say no to that? That's not only, obviously it's a big gig. It's these, oh yeah, you're going to play stadiums, whatever. Yeah, that's great. But it's also, I get to play those songs. And that's something that even what I've done thus far, I've had many moments of like, oh, I get to play those songs.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of fun. Who else? I don't even know. Like AC/DC, like even if like Cliff Williams, they're going to go back up, but Cliff doesn't want to do it. Call me.
Yeah.
I'll be in a heartbeat. Or like if I could get my double bass slap chops up where I can do this a lot more, like I can do that a little bit, but not that great. If I could get that up to snuff, I would be Brian Setzer. Give me a blast to play.
Yeah.
There's so many things. And, I at one point I'm like, man, I hope I get that call, or I hope a call like that comes in. But I do have to take a step back and go like, man, you've gotten some great calls. Don't forget that you're very fortunate, and be grateful that you still get calls like that, that are maybe not that particular gig, but they're this gig, and that's still pretty freaking cool.
Yeah, no doubt. You've gotten great. Like I say, the resume is tremendous, and there's just such great work in what you've done. It's really, really special. Tony Levin, doesn't he play? He plays a stick, right? Like the Chapman stick.
Yeah, he does. And there's a good example of a player that one of the ways I try to model myself, because there's a guy, if you go see him play live, and I've seen him play his solo band, and I've seen him with Seal. He plays everything. He'll play the Chapman stick. He'll play a electric version of the double bass, this thing right here. Right. I got one of those too somewhere. And then he'll play a 4-string and a 5-string and a fretless. And bass. He'll also play synth bass.
Wow.
So when we saw him, we went and saw him, I don't know how many years ago now, with Seal. And he has his own little like station. It was literally, he could just swivel and play a different type of bass.
Wow.
Swivel up the Chapman stick, play the Chapman stick. And so if I can, I'm like, man, I'll switch off and get to play all the things. It's so much fun.
Yeah.
But yeah, he does. And that's one of those things where I don't own a Chapman stick. I've messed around with them, and they're really cool. I love the sound of them. And eventually I'll be like, all right, let me plop down however many thousands of dollars that is.
Right.
The things that have stopped me from making a purchase like that is but I could use that money and buy this other bass, which I know I'm going to use on this next gig or this next session. It's going to get, because that's been my philosophy with everything that I own and purchase. It's like, okay, it's got its place. It's going to get used. It's going to make its money back somehow,
Right. Yeah, that's tough. As a photographer, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
I just bought a fisheye lens, and they're thousands of dollars, these things, and it's like, I don't know if I'm ever going to use it. I really, and if I do, it's probably for one shot, but I gotta have it. It's one of those things.
Well, it's one of those things, and also I think it's, even though you can't visualize, like, I don't know when I'm going to use this. I don't have a gig where I'm going to use it, but you can go like, maybe it's a catalyst for your creativity. Maybe you're just out on the field shooting. You go, man, let me try the fisheye lens, see what that looks like, and then all of a sudden you come up with something you didn't think of before because you had it readily available. There you go.
Yes. And get yourself a Chapman stick, my friend.
I will.
Very cool. Luis, I hope we can do this again, man. I had the time of my life. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Of course, anytime, man. Holler anytime. We'll do it again.
All right, man. And have fun at that gig. That's a man. More power to you, man. That is the stress. My stress level for you is through the roof. Just to jump into a position like that, it's crazy what you do. It's really cool.
It is, but you learn how to I don't want to say cope with it, but you learn how to approach it. Like, okay, well, let me just do my homework and make sure I'm ready. So. Even before I go, I've got right here on my desk, I've got a couple charts of some of the songs just to I've already ran through it. I made my notes, but I'm going to refresh my brain before I have to on the bus tonight. And just so that way I'm that much more comfortable when I get there.
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
It's incredible, man. What you do is great. I appreciate it. I appreciate you putting music into the world, man. It's special.
Oh, my pleasure, for sure.
All right. Yeah, let's do it again. And maybe I'll see you on the road too.
Absolutely. And give me a holler, let me know, and I'll do the same if I'm in the area as well.
Yeah, fantastic. All right. Luis, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you, man.
Man, I appreciate you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Bye-bye.
Bye.